Once you have your thesis and reasons figured out and you've got those written in on your essay planner, be sure to get them checked off by Mrs. Rewley. And then you will start reading and adding and researching your topic to find evidence to support your argument, to support each topic sentence. This document shows several different examples and types of evidence that you might be looking for in the articles that you're reading. I might not read through every single example, but you can look for facts or statistics. We actually looked at several of those in the articles that we read before we started this writing. And you can tell a story or an anecdote. There's an example there of someone who took a year after high school before they started college to prove that that gap year can help you find the right career path. You can give an example. To become a web designer, real estate agent, or chef, you don't have to have a college degree, but having a degree won't prevent you from getting any of those jobs. On the other hand, you can't become a teacher, an accountant, a doctor, or an engineer without a degree. And this would be evidence to prove that a college degree increases your job options. Again, this is just for an example essay. You would do the evidence that supports your topic. You could have a quote from an expert or a non-expert. This was a quote from a college student who was able to figure out her career path while in college. And then a scenario, a what-if situation. There are many different types of evidence. These are just 5 specific types that you might consider or think about in your body paragraphs. And you can pause this if you want so that you can read the specific examples. You also want to make sure you choose the right evidence. When choosing evidence to support your argument, look for evidence that is relevant, sufficient, and credible. Those 3 things. And then it goes into some explanation here. Relevant means that it actually supports the argument you're trying to make. Evidence that is not relevant may still be on the same topic, but it doesn't prove the point you're making. Suppose you're trying to convince your parents to let you stay out an hour later. You argue that you are responsible and they can trust you to make good decisions. If you say, I walk the dog anytime you ask, so obviously I can be trusted, it's not relevant. Although doing a household chore shows responsibility, it's not the kind you need to make good choices about safety. What is relevant would be this example. You have left me home on my own a few times and everything went fine. That proves I am trustworthy. This is pretty good proof that you can be trusted in situations where you're unsupervised. Being able to stay out later seems like a logical next step. You want to make sure your evidence is sufficient. That means there's enough evidence to support the argument. You might provide some fact or story that proves your point, but if it's only a small sample, it won't be very convincing. Let's say you're trying to convince your principal to make the school start time later. You argue that students will perform better academically if they wake up later. It's not sufficient to say, I can personally focus much better in my later classes. This might be true for all students, but only one example is not sufficient to prove it. An example of sufficient would be a Northwestern University study of over 2,000 students showed that student test scores rose by 10% in schools that moved to a later start time. Because this study observed over 2,000 students, it is stronger proof that a later start time impacts student achievement. You also want to make sure that your evidence is credible, means that it comes from a reliable, unbiased source. Suppose you're trying to convince a parent to only buy locally grown food. You argue that local food is healthier. An example of something that's not credible, the local Association of Farmers reports that locally grown vegetables have a higher vitamin content than those shipped to stores from across the country. Although this might be true, it comes from the local farmers, who would benefit from more people buying local food, so it is less credible. What is more credible is to say that the USDA has reported that locally grown vegetables have a higher vitamin content than those shipped to stores from across the country. It's the exact same fact, but it comes from a federal agency rather than local farmers, so it seems more believable. Again, you can back up and look at these examples again if you need to. But what you're going to do now is go back to your essay planner and begin filling out the evidence you will use to support each of your 3 points. Ask yourself if the evidence is relevant, sufficient, and credible. If not, start looking for other evidence that will be more effective. If you can't find any, think about changing that point to something else that can be proven with better evidence. Again, this is going to take some time. The evidence piece is going to take the most time because you do have to do quite a bit of reading. You might be doing a Newsy topic, reading those articles, or having to search on your own. So it takes time to read through the articles and zero in on the actual evidence that's going to support your points. I'll be around to help.